Paul, you know what's great about my phone?
No.
Well, it's nice. It's got this gold color. Um, it's gonna be very valuable one day. You know how I know this?
Well, because they've only sold 47 million of them
Yeah,
instead of 78 million of them,
yeah.
or
This is
whatever the
the
numbers are.
this is the crap phone that nobody's buying, and that's how I should put this thing in like a little air glass, like sealed container,
I
and then
mean, you,
yeah,
you got to remember that it's still selling better than any phone on earth, right? I mean, it's only not meeting Apple's expectations, but Apple was already selling like 10 times as many of these things as anyone else.
all I'm saying, Paul, is this one is more rare than the iPhone X.
Hmm. That could be true.
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out. Well, actually, no, we won't ever find out
No,
because
we
they're
won't. No, we won't.
yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar, apparently, I think Bloomberg wrote up or somebody wrote up or everybody's been speculating for a while that the iPhone hasn't been selling all that well. And then just the stories kind of keep piling on of it's not
It is
selling
kind of
well.
incredible, you know. You can really get a sense of the sharks circling, this carcass in the water, but this carcass is worth like 150
Yeah.
billion dollars or something. I mean, you know,
It's Apple's only going to put maybe $10 billion in the bank instead of 12. I mean,
yeah, it's just
it is,
come on.
it's fun to watch because people are like trying to, whatever.
Can we use the word beleaguered again? Is that back in vogue? I miss beleaguered. Remember when Apple was always beleaguered?
Yeah. You know what is
Now they're just
beleaguered though?
malignant.
Look at this beautiful
You can't
graphic.
spell beleaguered without E.
Look at this. So I think this is from Hacker News. But I mean, look at this. You
Is
got
that an E in the middle of a Chrome logo?
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
It's like all this time we never knew, but if you zoomed in close enough, that little glint in the middle was actually an E.
So for those of you who are listening
under
to
a
this,
rock.
and I was gonna say under a rock, but this happened late last night, and I don't think this is under a rock. This is just us educating the world, Paul. It's what we do here every single.
Educating the world.
Anyways,
Edge
so
skating.
somebody slap him with a fish. Anyway, so the news came out. It came from Zach. He was like, "Hey, Microsoft's abandoning Edge." And I think there were some other reports that came out that said, "Hey, this report or announcement might come as early as this week." And so, yeah, we will see here. But the foundation here, and there's about 5,000 questions, and we only have answers to maybe 6 of them at this point. Are supposedly that they're just ripping out Edge to HTML and they're going to replace it with Chromium, which is what powers Chrome and all the other WebOS essential derivatives. And that's it. That's all we know.
And that's enough. You may recall, literally yesterday, in conversing about something else, I said what Microsoft needs to do is get rid of Edge and just give you a choice when you sign into Windows for the first time. Which one do you want? And everyone would choose Chrome, because that's what they choose in the real world.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be quite like that though.
No, it won't. It won't.
Yeah.
But this has the same effect, and you I guess you go through these stages of acceptance when it comes to something like this. But the thing I would tell people, I think I have told people, actually I've written this, is this is all good news. So for example, let's say you're a fan of Edge. Those people exist. There's like 17 or 18 of them somewhere.
You were so hurtful, Paul. So hurtful.
No, kidding.
There's 19.
Your life's not going to change. Nope. The application itself, there's no reason that should change. If I assume that the reason people use Edge is because there is some feature or some set of features that they like that's not in other browsers, or they just like using the thing that Microsoft makes or the thing that comes with the operating system. It's something you don't have to install, and your life is not going to change. For the rest of us, and I would say, for the majority of people using Windows 10, things are either not going to change perceptibly or they're going to get a lot better, depending on how you look at it, because the rendering engine that Edge uses is used as a core part of the Windows product. It's a core component, It's used to render web content, not just in web pages that you see in a browser, but also in apps, and to handle progressive web apps, which is a new type of store app.
Mm-hmm.
There are people. I ended up writing 2 articles about this. Because I kind of wrote the first one where I was like, this is awesome news. And then I started getting the feedback from the negative Nellies out there in the world. And I realized, of course, there's always going to be these fudsters out there who talk about things like Chrome resource usage, which I've always found to be insane. Not the usage, but the complaint, because Windows handles memory and resource allocation automatically and will cut this thing off at the knees if you need it. I also demonstrated, like on the fly. I just looked at mine because I use Chrome extensively. I right now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate. Actually, maybe more, because one of these might be.
Are you a masochist?
Six. 6 different Chrome windows running, right? Because I use the apps pinned to the taskbar, as well as the browser. And in one of the browser windows at the time, I had 10 open tabs. Right now, I probably have more than 10, actually. It looks like 12 or something. It was using 1.4 gigabytes of the 16 gigabytes of RAM in this system. The other thing I happened to notice when I was looking at Task Manager was that Skype, this application we're now using interactively, which was sitting in the background doing nothing, was using more CPU power than than Chrome was. So I've never understood when someone says to me something like, yeah, but Chrome uses a lot, like too much of the system resources. I am immediately suspicious of that person because I don't understand why they think that or why they know that. What are they looking at? Like, what causes them to look at that? I've consistently found on low power systems, like Windows 10 on ARM is a weird example because Chrome is not native, or what do you call it? Like a Core Y series type thing like the Folio. Chrome runs better than Edge, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand that. And so there's that, and then there's the other crowd we always hear from the, it works fine for me group. I don't see any reason to use something better because what I have is fine, and that thing that's fine is always something that's made by Microsoft, and that's the kind of the lack of their, the end of their thinking. I just whatever. You know what? This is going to be better for everyone. I hope it happens. I hope it's true. That's the thing. Like, it would be
right.
What a tragedy would this be if this wasn't happening, right? So we'll see. But by the way, to your point that it might happen as soon as this week, I was thinking Build would be the obvious time to announce this. But actually today, Microsoft is hosting an event called Connect, which is developer-oriented. And honestly, it would make sense for them to provide an early peek at what they're doing to developers now.
Yep.
And then maybe shipping the first preview of it or whatever.
For full transparency's sake, it's not my people or insiders or whatever saying this week. It was somebody else wrote it up and said it might be as early as this week. So
yeah, no, I don't know anything about it either. I'm just saying we do know that Connect is happening. And when I heard you say that, I thought, actually, yeah, you never know.
So there's more to this as well. Like I'm in the same camp as you. First off, we talk about Windows Lite yesterday. This kind of solves a lot of those problems, and maybe that's why they're moving more aggressively towards this model. Yep. The other super interesting thing that I think backs up why they might do this, if you remember when they bought GitHub, Microsoft now owns Electron, which is a very popular Chromium-based essential web wrapper, which is used by a lot of...
There was some worries about what they might do to Electron, which was always stupid, regardless of what happens with Edge. But
yeah. So that kind of backs up why they might move to this. The other thing, too, is, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, Edge doesn't make money, right? It's not like...
Yes.
It's not like...
Right.
There's no business model of Edge, right? It's not like people buy Windows 10 for Edge. It's not like they pick up their iPhone and go, oh, I got to download Edge. Like, that's not a thing. And so for them, Microsoft is competing with Edge HTML against a company that makes their entire business model essentially based off what happens in a browser. Google, right? Google has a extremely vested interest to make Chrome and Chromium the best experience possible. And Microsoft has a very marginal reason to make Edge HTML the best possible engine. And so they were kind of doomed from the beginning on this because they're never going to out-resource Google in this field because Microsoft has no reason to. If Edge was better than Chrome, they're still not going to make more money.
Right.
There's no
Or
benefit to it.
or even drive more users. I mean, it's just not possible. The other thing is, I've heard from people who are kind of worried about like what I've heard described as kind of like a web monoculture, right? That if everything is basically based on Blink or WebKit, and Blink being the Chrome rendering engine is actually a derivative of WebKit, that we've achieved some form of monoculture. And that's a really glass half empty way of looking at it. In this case, I would describe that as the world has coalesced around a standard. And actually, that's a good thing. Differentiating on rendering engine is the wrong place to differentiate.
Yep.
What we want is to, as a developer, as a content creator, like we might be, to deliver something that people can read or view or whatever it is everywhere accurately and the same. That's the goal. We don't want to go back to a world of this site best viewed on a Netscape Navigator or whatever those buttons used to be. The way you innovate, the way you differentiate is in the user experience, the application, right? And so, like I said earlier, if there are people who prefer Edge for some functionality, whatever it might be, tab grouping, or it's got a nice reading mode, which you don't get in Chrome, or whatever it is, that stuff doesn't go away, guys. That's the point. This isn't a monoculture. This is not negative. There's literally no way to contort this into something bad without being misinformed or just outright lying about it, which is why, again, if this doesn't happen, I'm going to be shell-shocked.
Yeah.
Like now that this idea, I never would have in my wildest moment thought that this was possible. We had a discussion, you and I don't know if it was yesterday, well, I guess it would have been yesterday, when we were talking about WinLight, and I was saying, this thing just doesn't make sense. It's something that I say about Microsoft all the time, but they're just so wrong-headed in so many ways. Like they just go down these weird paths, like Windows 10s and RT, and it's like, of course they're going to do this. They're just, it's so crazy. And then you find out about this, and it's like, okay, that's interesting. This is a step in the right direction. This is Microsoft doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And this is a good sign.
The thing that keeps coming back into my head is there's a leadership quality, right, that says when you realize that you are the thing that's in the way, getting out of the way shows that you are a true leader, right? That means that you recognize in yourself that you are the problem. And Microsoft, if this pans out, has recognized that the challenges ahead for it in the web space are itself. And by getting Edge out of the way, they are positioning themselves much better for the future. They really are.
And focus on what's important.
Right.
Why this is it's interesting that this ties into the conversation that we had just off the cuff last week on Windows Weekly, where I said, and I just threw this out. I don't mean to say this is what they should do, but I said, look, why if you could base Windows on Linux and just let other people worry about that because they're going to, and you just build your user experience and app compatibility on top of it, that's a win.
Yep.
If to an average user, if you hand them this thing and it looks like Windows and it runs Windows apps,
they don't care.
Who cares what's under it? And now I'm not saying that. No, I just made that one up. I don't think that's happening. I'm not even 100% sure it should happen. But it's interesting that that's exactly what they're doing with Edge, which is basing it on something that's already out there in the world, that's being actively developed and is being kept up to date with standards, and making now Windows a first-class citizen in this world. They don't have to do the stupid work of adhering to every random standards test that's out there, because there are a lot of weird ones. When new capabilities are added to progressive web apps, which are going to happen very aggressively because it's a new platform, to make sure you're always up to date. They've never been able to ship this thing outside of Windows, so it's on like an every 6-month cadence, which is a nightmarishly slow pace for a web browser, a terribly fast pace for an operating system. But for a web browser, that's a monotonous amount of time between updates. And November happened, and we finally got that update, and it's 6 more months, guys, till the next. You can't update a web browser in 6 months. That's crazy. So this is a good thing. One thing I don't know if I'm going to write this or not, but I want to throw this out as an idea. I was really sad to see Terry Myerson leave Microsoft, and the reasons for that are many. I'll give you a 2 just to be completely transparent. I mean, he was very open with me and talked to me a lot privately. And this reminded me of how things used to be at Microsoft. Like when Jim Alter was in control, it was very much like this. He'd have like dinners with people, and you talk to him on the phone. You go out and see him in person, and you always had a sense that there was a human being there, and they cared, and they were doing the right thing for the product. The other thing I really liked about Terry Myerson was that he came up out of Windows Phone, which had been sent to Siberia under Steven Sinofsky. Those guys rated Windows Phone for the best ideas that they had, put them into Windows 8 in completely incompatible ways, and then never talked to them again, and always treated them like the black sheep of the family they'd wanted nothing to do with. And so to see him and that team kind of come back and take over Windows to me was very exciting, because it was kind of a righting the wrong kind of thing. And Brad, and I'm sure people understand this now, that one of the great things that he did, Terry, was to reverse all of the terrible secretiveness of the Sinofsky era. The Windows Insider program is a direct result of that. All that said, I'm starting to now realize that with Terry gone, this company can and now is taking some steps that it never would have taken under Terry. And I see far-reaching ramifications are possible, including more of a cooperation between Google and Microsoft, right? And so the web teams are actually, by the way, always very close.
Yep.
They're good guys. They get along. They like each other. They keep each other informed of what they're
doing. They have a common mission. They really do.
Right. That kind of exceeded or went beyond the bounds of the corporate relationships that occurred between those two companies. This tells me that Satya Nadella is taking this approach that you've seen elsewhere in Microsoft, and we're now starting to apply it to the product I care about,
Yeah.
And it's very exciting. And so again, I don't know. I don't know if this is happening. I don't know if this is going to lead to more stuff. I don't know anything really, but apprised of this possibility, it's hard not to get excited by what could kind of cascade off of it.
Yeah. The one of my favorite Terry Myerson stories was I can't remember if it was you told me, if it was Gabe that told me, if it was Bill Karagunis. But when Gabe and Bill Karagunis launched the Insider program, they went to Terry and said, "Hey, we're going to do this external beta program, and we're going to invite," it was like 5,000 people. And Terry looked at him and said, "Why not invite everybody?"
Yeah.
And then it was.
Yeah. After he left, Terry told me that very specifically, one of his goals was that everything Sinofsky did to hide what Microsoft was doing was going to be torn down. And when he heard about the Windows Insider program idea from those guys, he was like, this is, and this is, the Windows Insider program has its own goofiness, and they have its own, there's a schedule that occurs, and they have rings, and it's weird. But again, a return to the more open development style that Microsoft used to use. And, back in the day, Jim Allchin or Bill Gates or, whoever would stand up on stage and they would talk about the future. That was always a part of it. Microsoft very specifically appeared at CES every year to talk about the future. And not, here's something we're going to ship this year, but here's how we see the world going. This was kind of a core part of the company, that it was, it was staffed or led by futurists, And with Sinofsky, it was like the Soviet Union. All the gates closed, the locks came on, and they were really serious about locking people out. They had their reasons. I mean, obviously, I think it was an overreaction to what happened to Windows Vista, but and Longhorn, really. I mean, but
it's a good book that has some of this history in it.
Yes,
just a little.
Yes,
Yeah. It's interesting. I think, the next 6 months of Windows is going to be interesting, which candidly, I don't think is something we've been able to say for a while, because we got into this rut. It's like, okay, we have an update coming in the fall, one coming in the spring. They're both going to do modest amount of features. Who knows if that's going to be the next My People? Who knows if it's actually going to do anything? Who knows if it's going to break all the webcams? And now it's like, wow.
Well, you know what though? Let's say it changes nothing. And by nothing, I mean
everything
to the average user. No, I mean nothing. Sure. In other words, Windows 10 version, whatever comes out, this is the new rendering engine. Google doesn't come on board. There's not an explosion of Windows progressive web apps in the store. whatever. Edge comes up, it looks like Edge, it works like Edge. If that's the worst case scenario, this is still a huge win because Microsoft is not focusing engineering time and effort and money on something that doesn't matter, and nothing changing. That's a huge win.
Yep.
Right there, that's a huge win. But you know what? I think it's going to be better than that. I think it's going to be better than that for Microsoft. I think it's going to be better than that for developers who are the ones who are really impacted by this. And I think it's going to be better for users.
I do too.
This show is this going to go? Yeah. So there are Connect announcements occurring.
Yep.
So this show will be live after that occurs, right?
Yep.
All right. So I'll just say that there are going to be other announcements for developers related to open sourcing certain technologies and so forth, and it's kind of interesting. But, well, actually, let me just say what those technologies are. Windows Presentation Foundation, or WPF, WinForms, Windows Forms, which is, I think it sort of is the predecessor to WPF, if I'm not mistaken. And then something called I think it's called the Windows UI XML library, or whatever the name of that thing is. But what these things are basically are user experience technologies that predate Windows 10 and the Universal Windows Platform. Depending on the year, these things were completely ignored by Microsoft, were never updated. And there's been a little bit of a switch. And so in the same way we see like things happening over here that would never have happened under Terry, perhaps, we're seeing on the developer side a step back from that cliff of the one-way dead-end street, that Microsoft has had with Windows 10, where they're going to fully support these technologies in the past that, by the way, most developers on the Windows side of the fence still use because they run on all versions of Windows. WPF, I think, dates back to Windows XP. If it doesn't, Windows Forms does. But they've been around for a while, and they work, And this kind of pragmatic approach is the Microsoft I used to know. This is right. And this Edge thing, again, I don't actually know if it's true. I desperately want it to be true. It falls into the same category. I understand there's going to be some fear and misunderstanding around what happens and, oh my God, what if this or whatever, and I get it. But again, this is a net positive. I have a heart. It's not even a net positive. I think it literally is a positive. I can't think of anything negative that comes out of this.
Yep. I have very little to disagree with there. I mean, I can't think of how this is going to negatively impact Microsoft.
Back when they announced Windows 10 and Edge, and I think the original plan was, it's hard to remember this, but the Edge rendering engine, which is called Edge HTML, is just a fork of the Trident rendering engine, which was in IE from, I think, A2 or something. I don't remember. I don't know how far back it goes. But the original version of IE used code from Mosaic. I mean, it was like a long time ago. And they came up with their own rendering, web rendering engine, Trident. And originally, I think there was going to be a version of IE in Windows 10 that had that rendering engine, and then Edge as well. And then there was going to be some transition. And then at some point, they said, you know what, we're going to ship the old one in IE in Windows 10. You can use it if you want, and then we're going to have this new thing. And I just remember hearing that and thinking, like, guys, this has never worked. Like this, your rendering engine has never worked. And like I said earlier, keeping up to date with all the standards and the way things are going now, it's very fast with PWAs especially. Why put yourself through this? Like, why do this?
Yeah, let somebody else do it, and then you can just build value add on top, like Microsoft likes to do. Actually, that's what Microsoft pitches to all their partners, right? They say, take our product and add value to it, and you'll make money.
Apple doesn't talk about this anymore, but when the Mac was the focus still, and Steve Jobs had returned, and they were improving OS 10, very quickly, like every year, and it was always a big deal. They had all the cat names, remember, and everything. One of the things they used to really promote at that time was how Mac OS 10 was based on open standards, because it was based on the Mach microkernel, which Avi Tevanian had developed and was cross-platform, and it was based on, I think it was like FreeBSD type stuff was there, and Darwin was like the open source kind of version of OS 10, and they were giving it back to the community, which dropped off. But the point of everything they did was they're always building on top of this stuff and adding value, like you just said. In fact, when they announced Safari, that's exactly what they did. They built off of, I don't know if it was, I think it was called WebKit. It might have been called KHTML at the time, but it was a KDE based web browser and browser rendering engine. It became WebKit. WebKit is, as far as I'm concerned, is the web today. I mean, I know Blink is really what Google uses, but they did use WebKit and then they forked it themselves. But it is exactly what you said. You take this open standard, it's developed by others, it's out in the open, it works great, and you build value on top of it. And that's where you innovate, and that's where you differentiate. And Microsoft is finally doing this now, and it's just smart. I hope it happens.
It is.
It would be so awful after all this. You imagine? I've known about this. What time is it? I've known about this for about 3 hours, and if this thing doesn't happen, my world is going to implode.
And don't worry, folks, we will live stream that. That will be...
Yep. I'm going to go right from the first stage of grief to standing on the edge of a cliff with a glass of scotch wobbling, you know.
And don't worry, I'll be sitting behind you just taking tips going, do it.
Yeah, no, you'll be in a one of those Titanic deck chairs and you'll just lean over and kick me with your foot. Yeah.
You got anything else for today, Mr. Thrat?
I don't think there is anything else today, Brad.
I don't think so either.
It's going to be impossible for me to focus on anything today.
Yep. So hopefully Microsoft will make this announcement soon. We don't exactly know when or potentially even if, but hopefully they make this announcement soon. And everybody else, have yourselves a wonderful Chromium-filled day, and we'll catch you right back here tomorrow.